CRA is called back into session. Roll call, please. Thanks.
Miranda.
Here.
Maniscalco.
Here.
Hurtak.
Here.
Clendenin.
Here.
Vieira. Carlson.
Here.
We have physical quorum.
Thank you so much. Okay, guys, we were on the latter half of, and Councilman Carlson, you're recognized, sir.
Yeah,
If no one else, go ahead.
I mentioned earlier that, to ask Ms. Kopeski, sorry if I pronounced it wrong, about the Funland deal, and I've got a copy just of 2 pages, and I need to go deeper into it. I try intentionally to forget things after we've approved them, but it was it's apples and oranges. First of all, it's a 99-year interest-free loan for $12 million. So there's a subsidy there, and that it's interest-free. I don't know how it gets paid back in 100 years, but that's a different page. But but here's the kicker: it's up to 120% AMI, and so you were talking about 80% AMI is market rate right now. 120% is way above market rate, and so in theory, anything between 80 and 120, anything above 80% really shouldn't have any subsidy at all. And so if it's 35,000 a unit, it doesn't matter, because that something that's 120% AMI is really above what an average person can afford right now. So if this was talking about 50% AMI, that would be a difference, but it's not. So anybody can look in this? Okay.
And Councilman Miranda, if I may, really fast before, guys, we have a meeting this evening at 5 o'clock. We're at 3:30. We still have another item after this. So let's move forward, but let's move forward with vigor. And
This
so
will be
please.
my last time speaking.
Yes, sir.
And I have nothing against the developer or everyone that's involved in this thing. I just question myself over having a sandwich at the, and you're right, Subway. I didn't want to say it because then McDonald's get mad at me. Quick recovery, wasn't it, Guido? And what I'm looking at is that, I don't know, I guess the CAC approved something, I don't know what they did. And then I look around, and I don't know how much money the CRA is gonna have left if we pass this to do other mortgages, help people with their mortgage or payments or whatever. I don't know none of that stuff. So I'm taking a shot here one way or the other. And I just don't like to vote no. I like to vote yes. But I just have doubt in my mind that I don't know these questions or these answers. I don't know what the CRA has, doesn't have left once this is paid. Do they have money for assistance? I don't know. And so I got to look at something all the way around. I got to look at the known fact and the unknown fact at the same time, which is very difficult for me or anybody else.
Yes, sir. Yes, and I think we have Mr. McCray here for that. Mr. Maniscalco, did you want to speak before
real
that?
Real quick, I mean, if it's a question about the amount of money and in regards to, other projects for what has been earmarked for housing, can the developer still manage to move forward with a lower amount? Instead of, killing the project, saying no, I don't know the answer.
Ultimately, they would have to answer that question. I'm sorry. Good afternoon, Cedric McCray, Tampa CRA Director. But Mr. Barraday would have to answer that question.
And before that, if I may, because a question was asked, I think by inference, how much is going to be left out of that 30% for the East Tampa CRA?
Yeah.
So we did have a special call budget workshop on May 27th, and then we had a CAC meeting this past Tuesday, June 3rd. And the East Tampa CAC actually recommended more than the allocated or mandated 30%. It's a little above 50. But those dollars are for housing rehab program, which is we probably have committed over $3 million in that for this fiscal year. Down payment assistance, and I did share this with them during that process, that we've allocated 1.5 already this fiscal year, and talking with HCD to reprogram some more dollars as well. And then we have the infill housing program. They did, have conversations about that. Creation and conversion, and this ultimately would be where that would fall. And that allocation was right at $2 million. They had requested that $500,000 be moved to the commercial grants and things of that nature. And then we also have the strategic acquisitions, which the board has made it very clear that you all want us to be as aggressive as possible in working with real estate to find available parcels in all of the CRAs.
And if I may ask, though, how much would be left for housing out of the CRA in East Hampton if we approve this at the full requested amount?
If it's over 2 fiscal years, it would be 2.5 per year, and but that would definitely affect how they've made allocations or suggestions. Ultimately, the budget would be coming before you all at the July meeting.
Okay, so council, before we continue speaking, how about this, to get this thing moving, because again, we've been on this for a while, and I want to make sure that we bring this in for landing one way or the other. Is someone prepared to make a motion on this?
To approve it as is?
I just have a question based on this year's. How much do we have this year in this bucket?
Based on the recommendation from the CAC, roughly about 5.5 million.
No, in FY '25.
Yes,
So
remaining.
right now, we have 5.5
Yes,
million.
they made the request to reprogram some dollars towards affordable housing initiatives.
But I meant in the sub bucket for, you had a special name for it.
Creation and conversion.
Yes, so
Yes.
5.5 in creation and conversion.
No, that's just across the
That's the
board.
total.
Yes,
Okay,
that's the total.
so what do we have in creation and conversion?
The request for next fiscal year was
No, this year.
2 million.
What do we have right now? About 2 million, okay. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well,
Yes,
I still think that this has, I mean, I don't know if you guys had any opportunity to work any of these things during the lunch break and you wanted to present that, but absent that, I still think that the wise thing to do is to, you guys work, now you hear the fiscal realities of this budget, and that you guys get together and we continue this until the July meeting so that we have real figures, and then we understand, one, how much money we have available, what the impact that has on the rest of the budget for like down payment assistance and all that, because we don't want to steal from one program to pay for another. So I think getting the real dollars and again, I want to make sure you understand. I really do. I think it's a beautiful building. It's a great location. There's a lot of positive here. I just want to make this to be fiscally responsible for the people that live in that CRA district, and we're doing this for the right. It's the right amount of money for the right project, the right, all those things. I just really want it to be balanced. I really truly believe that we probably need to have those few weeks for you guys to work it out, work with staff, and come back with a really, a definitive, like, this is reasonable expectations of what we have in our bank account and what you're bringing to the table as far as AMI and benefit for the community. I just think, in my heart and soul, I think that we're not going to be able to get to a good result today like that, so.
And if I may, to call up Thad Baraday, were you able to work up anything during lunch? And we'll give you 2 minutes again so if you don't
Sure.
go ahead.
This does not respond to the comment that was just made, but from the discussion prior to our adjournment, we circled wagons, had some discussion with staff, and would propose the following in return for the approval of our special projects grant request at the $5 million today. We would voluntarily commit and restrict the AMI levels, 12 units, 80% AMI, 6 units, 50% AMI, 2 units, 30% AMI. That would be 8 units at the lower levels, and we would not make that contingent. We would make that a commitment that would be contracted. So it would change our marketing program so that we're not just making it, we would have 12 units available for 80% AMI, but the other units would be restricted, and we would commit to that right now. We can't do more than 8 vouchers for other reasons. It'd be the 50-year affordability lock-in. And then I think the issue became timing of the payments. And so by making that concession, we are reducing the amount that we can borrow under our construction loan. So we're raising the hurdle of private equity capital that we have to raise and contribute to the overall project. It was going to be $1.2 million under what we proposed. Now it's going to be $2 million, the $800,000 impact from that agreement being the delta, the change. And we would like the payments from the CRA paid on the same terms as our construction loan. So as we complete the project over the next 18 to 24 months, we would submit completion and verification that we've accomplished what we said we would accomplish, and then there would be a drawdown from the construction loan and a drawdown from the CRA. That creates a timing issue
Thank
that's a
you,
budget
Mr. Barrett,
question.
thank you very much. Councilman Clinton, if you wanted to go, then
Yes,
Councilman
just
Carlson.
a follow-up
and
on that, because
Ms.
I think the dilemma, though, again, with this 5 million, when taking into account that, as Ms. Park said, that the maximum, I mean, even $100,000 per unit exceeds what has been done anywhere else in the state of Florida. But then the fiscal reality of it, that our budget in the East Tampa CRA is over a two-year period, it would still only be 2.5 per year, if we could even do that. And even by doing, I'm hearing, even by doing that, we're still going to be potentially taken from other funds to be able to make that work. So you basically would take 100% of all the money for any other project in CRA for that particular type of project, and potentially cut into the down payment assistance, so some of the other programs. So I think that's where we're at. I think there's got to be some room in how we deal with this, because we just have so much money in our pot, and and restricted to those limitations. So I just feel like this is something y'all just need to talk about, and between now and the 24th of July, to get the real, because otherwise, because it was fiscal reality, it's just like we've got X amount of money to budget, and that's all we have. That's all we have, and right now, what they're telling me, what staff is telling me, is just for this next year, we've basically got $2 million out of this year, and maybe $2 million of next year, but that's all the money we have in that particular pot. And I don't know if this, understanding that, I don't know if the CRA is willing to say we're going to invest all of our money in one project. I mean, that's a big ask.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Carlson, and again, we're going to limit comments, if everyone's on board, to 2 minutes, so we can move this thing forward, because we have a 5 o'clock. And I think that for purposes of quasi-judicials, we need to have a break. That's just the way it is. We owe that to the public. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just quickly, now we have documentation that debunks the $35,000 per unit thing, so hopefully we'll never discuss that again. Ms. Parks is the one who put together the chart, and she did benchmarking on it, and we had a long discussion about it. If you all want to revisit that and look at the benchmarking of it, she made a comment earlier, but to go deep into that and the chart will take a lot of time. I think that this developer and others have put together in good faith presentations based on what we approved in February. If we want to change the chart, let's set up a meeting and put some kind of time after it so that we can go through and set expectations on what we can do. The reality is that there are a whole bunch of projects behind this. There's at least one $9 million project. So if we turn this down today, what this city has always done is turn down the small developers, turn down the nonprofits, and favor the big developers. And so if we turn this down today, I'm going to make a motion that we not allow any of those big projects to come back through for the next 2 years. Because if we're holding out money for a big developer and we won't give it to the small ones or the nonprofits, which essentially this is now, I think it's despicable. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the proposal that he just put on the table, which would be $5 million. He answered the community's question. It's a small developer who is he happens to be in the East Tampa. Because of the way the lines were drawn by somebody besides us, it's an area where it's going to completely transform that area. And he's answered the community's question by putting lower AMI. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the $5 million that would include 6 units at 50% AMI, 2 units at 30% AMI, 12 at 80% AMI. Remember, this other one was 120%. And can you also say that 2 of them are ADA? Can you commit to that?
Yes.
And is it 2 of the 80% that are at ADA?
And Mr. Barrett, if you don't mind coming up.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Thad Barrett, Urban Reworks. The ADA units are ground level and designed for that, and I hope that they would be the 30% AMI units, but I think.
So anyway, you'll commit to 2 ADA units.
Yes.
Which is important. So 2 ADA units, 6 at 50% AMI, which
Yes.
is what the community wanted, 2 at 30% AMI, and then 12 at 80% AMI.
Correct.
And that's for 50 years. You're going to take, this money is not paying for its construction. It's subsidizing that lease that we're buying that unit, buying down the lease over a 50-year period for people.
Correct.
And so it's a small developer, so the numbers are not going to be big. But if we turn down 8 units that are way below market, then we should turn down all the big ones that are gonna be coming
And this
throughout
is
the-
new construction affordable housing, which is different from available units on the market
So anyway,
today.
I make my motion.
We have a motion, we have a motion by Councilman Carlson, or board member, seconded by board member Maniscalco. Any discussion briefly? Go ahead,
Thank you very
sir.
much. I still haven't gotten a definitive answer from I know you mentioned the numbers. If we do this, what is left over for affordable housing, down payments, for things that we normally do without any development? I don't know if you have that or not.
Okay, so currently, B Parks, Community Development Coordinator, currently we have $1.5 million in the creation and conversion line item as of right now.
But that's including this?
So yeah, that's not even it. When I looked at the 1.5 million, I looked at first that calculation that I proposed for the 2 million, that was supposed to be 666 a year. That's how I broke down a 3-year commitment for this project at $2 million.
So in other words, you're telling me you don't have any money left over at all?
I don't, at one point, well, if you look at let's do the math, 5 million divided by 3 years. Cause that's what we're looking at, right? So 5 million divided, because our terms are 3 years, that's what we've been doing right now. So that's 1.6666 per year that we have to reserve for this project for 3 years. Next year, we have 2 million that we allocated for this creation and conversion. So again,
This would take all the money, this would be the only project.
Where's the
Correct.
money for the 9 million one coming from?
That would be part of the dollars that would be reprogrammed from
Yeah.
this
We
year.
have the money for the 9 million one, but we don't have the money for the 5 million one.
No, I didn't.
No, we don't have the money for it.
And that project would also have to be scheduled out as well.
Plus all the 10 others that are sitting out there or whatever.
correct.
So-
Because this, again, I just want to reference, East Tampa is the most developer request that we get through the door is for East Tampa. So that's just what it is. So the most developers are coming in for East Tampa. So this pot of money for unit creation and conversion is the most restricted. That's what, I rely on, defer to Mr. McCray to figure out how we can move that money, because I work off of right now a 30% budget for FY25 and a proposed 50% plus for 2026, because I'm not going to have any rollover. The rollover days are over. I'm just fully transparent.
I understand.
Board member Hurtak, Councilman Miranda, will you finish?
I'm
sir?
finished.
Okay, board member Hurtak, I think you wanted to speak, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. Going forward, when we are bringing these types of funding requests, from now I'm gonna ask for the financials for that CRA, because right now I'm very confused and I'm very visual. So I'm definitely gonna ask for that going forward, because I see the problem is you come for an ask, and this is a project that majority of us, I believe, want to support, but knowing that we don't have the money is kind of a big part of it. So it definitely would have been helpful from the get-go to know we didn't have the money. And so that's why
That's why I think we could continue.
Well, let me
And that ultimately was based on the recommendation
For 2 million.
from staff to the East Tampa CAC, and that's what it was based on.
So, and wait,
So we
before,
did
and
have
if
the
I may,
money
and if
for
I may,
2
Mr.
million.
Chair, wait a second. Let me make sure we're running this meeting properly. Board member Hurtak, did you have a request then for a definite amount specified in terms of what would be left over? So my issue is with voting on this today is I want to know exactly how much this is information that we would need to vote on this, right? I support this project. I want to see it go forward. If it gets continued to next month, I'll vote yes. I will, 99%, 99.9%. But we need that information. And again, that's not something that was requested before, so I'm not saying that as an attack on y'all. Y'all, God knows you guys go 85 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour zone, so we appreciate you guys. But we need that information, and I almost feel like I want to go, hey, let's wait 30 minutes, get the information, but we can't because of the clock. So, yeah, that's my thought.
And Well, we all have the same problem. My problem is that I know that if I go put all this in this basket, there's no more eggs in the basket. And I've got half a year to go.
Yeah.
And I got to balance it out between, do I put all my eggs in one basket? What about the others that are asking for help? And I understand this is 20 families, I understand that, but maybe I have more than this, I don't know. I'm trying to balance it out. This is not a bad project. I love the design, I love the location, but then again, what am I going to do if somebody knocks on the door? Hey, how about me?
So do we have those numbers available today on what's left over? You said we have $1.5 million already left over, correct? Aside from this?
Correct.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So what I need is not just, I need to know what's left in the CRA budget, period.
Okay.
Not just housing. I need to know all the areas. So, like I said, in the future, and I mean, I'm happy to work with you to visualize what I'm trying to see, is I'm really just looking for a second column in that I'm visualizing the schedule you all give us, the breakdown of where everything goes every time we look at the annual budget, but then maybe an extra column with what we've spent and what we have. So I don't, because, you know, I just asked, I think last meeting, to move $100,000 to the extra tree trimming,
Correct.
and that didn't seem to be a problem. So, but now I'm wondering, okay, I know where we took it from, some sort of, where did we take that?
Neighborhood infrastructure improvements.
Okay, so construction improvements, but I don't know what money's left in there. So I guess I'm wondering if there's money in other buckets that we could shift. And so that's why I kind of want the budget
Right.
as a whole, because I want to see where we could possibly shift funding from this year, if there is any. And so, I mean, I hate to say that we have to continue this, but I kind of feel like we do. I really want to see the numbers. I do support this project.
I withdraw my motion.
So if I may, I think there is,
Just a little clarity real quick. Just
Yes,
for-
sir, really
for-
quick.
For what you just said. It's not just this year, we need to see the projections for
Oh.
because how they're paid out too. So, I mean, the full spectrum of the payments and how that affects the budget and where we're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Right.
But I think, again, this is not just this project. And I'm so sorry to this developer, because you're the first one that we're doing this with. And so I apologize, because we want to approve this project. But what we're realizing in this is that we don't have necessarily the backup information that we need. And so I want to apologize profusely, because I do support this project. And I think that we can find the 5 million. I really do. It's just a matter of looking at, and if I had it in front of me, I could move that money now.
Yeah.
But I don't. There's the option of continuing it or talking about this potential guideline amendments, because I know these are going to be some questions, and see if we can have something come
So
back now. But I don't know how long it will take to pull those numbers together. And I guess that's a question.
Yes, we can.
Second.
I'd like to confer with our budget analyst to
Oh,
make sure, because she
okay.
would have the most updated information.
Second.
So yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I will agree to that only if it is literally the first thing on the
was gonna
agenda
say that.
before the director's report.
Yes. So we have a motion on the floor by Councilman Clendenin, seconded by Councilman Carlson, to continue this as item number 1. And again, I want to state my intention with this, which is support this project. But I think as stewards of the public's trust and funds, this is information that we have to exhaust to go through. And again, like Councilwoman Hurtak said, we will get there, because there's other ways to get there, but we have to go through the process. Otherwise, I think it would be wrong. So any other discussion for council? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
He did. I second. Can I make one?
Yes, sir, please.
I'd like to make one more motion since everybody's here. I would like to make a motion to put on the September 11th meeting a discussion that would be led by Ms. Parks to discuss the chart and any other benchmarking she has from other cities, and then also to discuss what you've learned from all the proposals you've gotten since February, so that we can determine if the chart is correct and what the guidelines would be.
We have a motion by Councilman Carlson, seconded by Board Member Clendenin. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Oh, she was saying something. Is it okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and everybody. Yeah, and again, it'll come back in 30 days.
Can I just ask?
Yeah, of course.
Are you having a scheduling problem, or are you just worried about that?
No, we're fine.
The clarity on it is that you threw out some numbers, and I think we all want to have a longer discussion about it, but this way you'll have 2 months to go through and really plan and think about it, and you can talk to us, and then you can present it all. But also looking in the context of the proposals you've gotten, because in the past what happened is, remember, we had proposals where people said, I need $10 million, but nothing was tied to it. We're specifically, with the chart, we're specifically buying a certain amount of AMI, a certain number of units for 50 years. And so at least we have certainty about what it is that we're getting. And so if you have new information that might change it or inform it, that would be great to know then. I know you've done a lot of research, so I want to make sure we see it. Thank you.
And Board Member Hurtak, and guys, I want to state
Yes,
again,
but I have
354.
Yes, I have a motion that's connected to this, in that we're gonna have to figure out the wording, but in the future, for any of these large format or the special projects, for any special projects that come in front of us, we are going to need a budget for that CRA that includes the entire budget of the CRA, what has already been spent for the fiscal year, and what is available.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's the motion, but I would love to work with you between now and next month on what I would like that chart to look like. Because, like I said, I can see it in my head, and I know what I think will help us be able to, and I know that you want to see the future, but the issue is we haven't approved that budget yet. But if you could bring.
Well, they have to project it, though.
Yeah, but obviously the projections can come with it, yes. But so for the future, to have that, our current FY budget with what has been spent, what is available in each category, and the projections for how we expect to pay this going forward.
So I second it.
Oh, I'm sorry, to add Ms. Kopesky on
So,
that as well.
We have a motion by Board Member Hurtak, seconded by Board Member Carlson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Can I say one other?
Just really quick before that, guys.
Yeah, I just wanted to.
Wait, really fast, if I may, before that, guys. We have another item. This should be continued to next month. Can we continue this item before the board discusses it?
It would be difficult because we were going to
Okay.
bring it back to you all in July as a part of with the budgetary conversations, as it relates to other commercial grants and projects. But
Okay. But again,
if it's the board's will, then.
Like I say, it's within our hands. It's within our hands. And before, if I may, Board Member Carlson.
I just wanted to remind everybody real fast. B, I want you to hear this too. I want to remind everybody, a month ago, we thought that we might not be able to spend any of the East Tampa CRA money past September. And so if that was still true, we would be pushing every project we could through. And so that dynamic has just suddenly changed in this meeting. But it doesn't mean that we should, change everything, but some environmental issues did change.
Okay, thank you very much, Board. Final item. Go ahead, sir. And how much do you think you need time-wise for the presentation, Bud?
15 minutes?
15?
Yes,
Okay.
15.
How about we'll give you 10? Is
Okay,
that
and
good?
then we'll
Yeah.
take any questions
So
you all
let's
have.
calendar 10 if you don't mind. Thank you.
So, yes, this
And
is
thank you for your work. I know.
Not a problem, understood. It's been a long day. So I'm
you
going to invite Ms. Reed up to discuss our feedback or your feedback related to the commercial grants policy.
Good afternoon, board members. Dee Reed, Economic Development Coordinator. In preparation for the policy update that we will be presenting to you in July, there are 5 guidelines that we will be requesting clarification from the board so that we can ensure that we are applying the policy in alignment with the intent of the board. So those items are establishing a type of architectural and historic preservation feedback desired for buildings 50 years and older that are not already subject for historic review under city code, determining whether restaurants who have city or state permits allowing more than 50% of their revenue from alcohol sales should continue to be eligible for CRA grants, determining if businesses who primarily sell alcohol should be added to the list that already excludes bars, lounges, and nightclubs from grant eligibility, determining whether to revise the commercial interior grant for consistency with the Florida statute, Chapter 163, and determining the grant repayment terms in the event of default. If it pleases the board, I'll read each grant guideline as it is currently worded in the policy and state the original intent behind the guideline. At that time, I'll yield the floor to you for your discussion and vote. And after that vote, I'll proceed to the next guideline.
Any discussion?
Okay. Guideline 1, structures exceeding 50 years of age require improvements to be reviewed by the city's architectural review and historic preservation staff first. An applicant must comply with all requirements and recommendations provided. The original intent is to incentivize the preservation of the community's heritage by preventing demolition of significant older buildings that lack historic designation. The question that would need to be discussed and voted: is it the board's intent that staff proceed with the architectural historic preservation review, but limited to the determination of restoration and reconstruction?
So, we talked about this before, and I believe that it is important to keep the building and allow people to fix it up. I don't want to incentivize tearing down buildings. So whatever it takes to support the historic preservation would be what I would vote for. So I don't know, are we doing like a vote for this? How do we?
You're voting to determine whether we want to limit their review to determining whether the building can be demolished or if it has to be restored, or if we want them to provide feedback in terms of what material can be used, what the finish looks like, how detailed we want to require them to meet those review feedbacks.
I guess my question is, what happens if the building isn't salvageable?
Then that would be they would determine that it would be okay for them to demolish. The issue that we're running into is that right now the guideline does not specify that their feedback is limited to just their determination of whether it can be demolished or not. So they're going further into a more detailed historic review, and where they're giving guidelines on how they can improve, the types of improvements, the type of material. And so we're wanting to know if it's your desire for us to limit their feedback to just the determination of demolition or not.
I'm going to defer to some of our historical people.
And if I may, I know Councilman Carlson, do you mind if Councilman Maniscalco goes before you?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
No, he can go first, it's fine.
You sure? I think since you were responding to her inquiry, that's why. I don't know.
It's fine, I'm gonna gather my
Whoever.
thoughts.
Well, also, and Councilman Carlson is also a historic preservationist
There you
person,
go.
so I was looking at
So
both.
please have
But
at it.
Guido's a historian, so he can bring it in at the end. I think that needs to be done, but I think it's a city process. The city has staff that are specialized in that. That's not, the CRA simply should be processing grants and not doing that kind of evaluation. The decision on whether to keep a building or not is not a CRA issue. The question is, once it's determined that it's a historical building, or that once a developer has decided that it's a historical building, then we have to decide whether we want to fund it or not. And we could put a clause in there that says if they tear it down, we're not going to fund it anymore. But the historic preservation grant would be for historic preservation, but we wouldn't have to make the decision as to what the rules are. Otherwise, we'd have to hire specialized staff or put a huge burden on our existing staff.
Thank you, sir. Maniscalco.
Councilmember Carlson brings up a good point regarding, CRA funding separate from the city of Tampa, our other role as a city council. The thing with Tampa and many cities post-urban renewal is so much has been lost. I have a magazine from 1963 in my office, a Life magazine, that talks about the upcoming projects of 1964 and 65. The highways, the interstates, the buildings that have been demolished for parking lots or will be demolished. We've done a horrible job. I don't know if in this country, if we have any UNESCO heritage sites. I don't know. But in other parts of the world, there are areas that are totally preserved. The best that we have is Ybor City, and then the West Tampa Historic District, which is 800 historic buildings within the boundaries, something like that. It's on Wikipedia, so it's easy to find. But the thing is, there's the term demolition by neglect, and I think it's abused. Going, I had a former City of Tampa elected official from a long time ago. I go, you were in leadership. I'm not gonna, if I get too specific, it'll give away his identity. I go, you were in leadership when this was knocked down. And he tells me it was more expensive to put a roof on it than what the building was worth, and we needed the parking for it. We needed the parking was more valuable. And even here, Caddy Corner, there was a beautiful hotel across the street here, and it was demolished in the late 60s. Anyways, I remember meeting a gentleman who was able to restore a historic brick building and repurpose it here on Franklin Street. It's there today. The buildings around it burned. They were demolished. There's new development there today. But against all odds, he wanted a building in downtown Tampa. And against everybody's opinion that didn't want to do it, he found an engineer that was willing to save the building. So the exterior is brick, and he built a new building within the building, right? But the facade is original, and it looks like it used to be. So, anyways, long story short, I don't think enough of an emphasis is put on preservation. It's always, we tried to fix it, but it's cost prohibitive, or, But anyways, what Councilmember Carlson says about keeping it separate, we're just here to approve grants, so.
Thank you, sir. Board Member Hurtak.
Does that provide any clarification? Because I didn't think so. I'm because I don't understand. I'm still not understanding. Can you give us an example?
Yeah, maybe I can clarify a little bit. The question is not whether they can, the city's historic, architectural and historic review, they're going to make the decision as to whether the building can be demolished or not.
Okay.
That's not what's in question. What we're asking is whether we want to just limit the review to that decision. If they decide, as it stands, these properties don't have to go through that review. They can make these improvements without going through the review because they're not designated as historic and they're not in a historic district. So they can improve these properties without going through the review. We are, as it stands, our funds have been tied to this review as in an attempt to try to preserve the history of these districts. So what we're asking is beyond the demolition question, which that's not what's in question, is do we want to allow them to specify what kinds of material can be used, what type, how they can improve the property? Do we want their review to be allowed to go that deep or to that level of review?
So basically what you're saying, and I'm going to use this as an example, the Gator building.
Yes.
So if we had the Gator building and someone came to us, say that was private property, and they came to us and said, we want to improve this. So what you're saying is they would say, no, it's not demolition worthy. So in fixing this up, you would need to
preserve the building.
You would need to preserve it.
So if their review findings are that they cannot demolish the building, if they don't agree to preserve the building, they cannot get CRA funds.
It's if they get money.
Right.
Okay. Because in some cases, it may not be worth saving the building. But I don't want to be the one that makes that determination, I guess. Yep. I guess that's where it comes down to. Okay. So say they decided the Gator building was historic. I'm still trying to understand this. And historic preservation said it needed to be preserved. We would only give money, and so what you're asking is if we would say, okay, you can only use concrete block since it was built with concrete block.
Right.
Thank you. And Board Member Carlson, did you want to speak again?
I just want to say, I think that decision should be left up to whatever the governing body is, the ARC or the barrio. And if it's in another area, if the city wants to do, or some other agency wants to do that, they can. But I don't think that the staff, unless we have specialized staff, I don't think we're able to do that. Remember, Chair Henderson was asking the other day about the windows, the aluminum windows versus the wooden ones, which is a big issue in all the historic places. That's not a decision that I think that we would just reimburse for windows and.
Correct.
And we don't have we can't afford the staff time to go through and figure out whether it's aluminum windows or that's up to the ARC or the barrio to figure out. One other quick thing, where Salsina's Park is, the family building was there. And I'm told by people who were in the 70s that the reason why it was torn down is because the federal government gave the city a $20,000 grant for parks. There were grants for parks, but not for historic preservation. And the point of that is that if we have a grant for historic preservation, it helps to preserve more buildings, even if they're not in one of these protected areas.
Thank you very much. Okay, now council or board members, is there a motion at all?
That helps, yes.
Okay, that helps?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there
Still
a,
don't think I understand.
what is the consensus? What's your interpretation?
My interpretation is that we don't want to specify the materials or exactly how they have to preserve it. If the decision is that it needs to be preserved, then they preserve the building. If they have the permission to demolish and reconstruct, then they can do so. But we restrict to that extent. Yes.
and so do we need a motion for this, or is there?
action item.
Okay, so
So
what's the pleasure of?
We just need a vote. It sounds like everyone is on the same page, but do we need an official vote
I would
from the?
imagine.
Yes, we need a vote.
Okay,
So can you clarify how you want us to say that?
We would like to, how would you say that we would structure the beginning? I guess it is the desire of the board to incentivize improvements for buildings that are 50 years of age or older, to limit the architectural and historic preservation review to the determination of restoration or reconstruction.
I move that.
we
Second.
have a motion by Board Member Hurtak, seconded by Board Member Maniscalco. There being no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and this takes care of this item. Okay. So- The what, I'm sorry? You're right. Okay.
All right. So the second guideline, as it reads today, bars, lounges, nightclubs, and restaurants deriving more than 50% of their income from the sale of alcohol are ineligible for CRA grants. The intent is to limit support of business categories that commonly contribute to the conditions of slum and blight, while also incentivizing more diverse, unique, and specialized businesses. The next two questions will relate to the same guideline. Question 1 for discussion and vote is the board's intent that staff remove restaurants deriving more than 50% of their income, from the sale of alcohol from the list of ineligible establishments?
Board Member Clendenin.
Okay, so for me, a legal business is a legal business. And if they're doing business legally in the city of Tampa, and we're talking about restoration of facades, facade grants, regardless of that business, they should be able to be eligible for this grant. I think that's kind of like what was the blue laws?
Yeah.
Back in the day, 1960s blue laws.
Yep.
I think in the city of Tampa, we've moved past that. And if a business is legal, they should be eligible for the facade grants.
So I would say the motion would be to remove that stipulation of the 50% alcohol sales, so remove them from the prohibited lists to allow them to. Yeah, so they're eligible for funding.
Okay, I have a motion.
Okay.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Board Member Maniscalco, seconded by Board Member Clendenin. Any discussion?
So the motion is to strike the prohibited items.
Yeah.
Facade grant is facade grant.
okay, so, let me pause you for 1 second.
Okay.
We cannot remove that restriction completely because it impacts the East Tampa CRP. So what we're asking is to remove the restaurants that derive more than 50% of their income.
Okay.
Okay.
disagree, by the way, so we don't have the votes.
Really?
Yeah.
You want them to tear down, you want them to let a building?
I think that
building
I think that bars do contribute to slum and blight, and so I agree with that statement.
But we're talking about the building.
You wanna go into the next one and come back?
But we're talking about the building.
My goodness.
Yeah.
My goodness.
The building, not the business.
Well, the other big issue it brings up is 10 years from now, how are we gonna police what they use a building for, right?
But by then, they've already beautified the outside, and the outside is what's going to bring
Yeah, exactly.
more, honestly, a coat of paint and a new sign can do wonders for a full neighborhood.
I mean, a building's a building, it's not
But you're talking about exterior grants, not
Yeah.
not historic preservation.
Yeah, no,
this is a
we're only
separate
talking about
question.
exterior grants.
Yeah, no, I'm okay with it with historic preservation, but not with exterior grants. So maybe when Vera comes back, we'll have the votes.
Is,
Do you want to go to the next one, or?
The next one's the same thing, basically. Isn't it?
Well, I can go to the next guideline. Okay. So the next guideline is the next item is the commercial interior grant. The original intent was to stipulate private investment and reactivate underutilized commercial spaces by offsetting costs associated with tenant conversion and improvements. The question for discussion and vote is the board's intent that staff proceed with revising the commercial interior grant to limit reimbursable improvements to those supporting building code compliance to align with the Florida statute, Chapter 163?
I would say yes. I think helping a building become compliant so that they can have a tenant is 100% what we're trying to do as a CRA board.
Second.
Okay,
Did I understand
Yes,
that correct? Okay.
we have a motion by Board Member Hurtak, seconded by Board Member Carlson. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and it is my understanding, and I apologize, I had to step outside for something, that we had a 3-1 vote, correct?
We didn't take a vote, we would.
Yeah, but it would have been.
Read it on sentence.
Okay, does anyone want to restate the motion? Because-
I can redo it.
Yeah, go for it. You were the motion maker.
So the motion was to strike the prohibition for the requirement of the 50%
For restaurants. that
for
derive-
restaurants in regarding to receiving funding.
Yes.
For,
Facade grants.
For, yeah, exterior facade
Okay,
grants,
yep.
correct?
This is for grants, period.
Oh, grants,
For
period. So we'll just
restaurants
keep
that
it.
derive more than 50% of their income, removing them from the prohibition of receiving CRA grants.
For the entire business, not just facade grants?
No, this is grants, period. CRA grants.
I thought we were just talking about facade grants.
This is policy across the board.
To strike them from the prohibited.
Who seconded that?
I
You
did.
Still second.
Well, what was staff's recommendation on this?
These are not items because our job is to do whatever it is that the board's desire is, so we did not make a recommendation.
Does anybody have a feeling from staff about what the real-world implications of this is?
We do have the attorney online, and we can defer to Attorney Shepherd.
Well, I don't know if
his-
he would, I mean, he would give us a legal opinion, but I just know about what y'all's experience was within the community with these.
can we,
Sure.
yeah, an example would be super helpful.
We had an example recently, Carmine's Restaurant in Ybor City was denied because they didn't fit because of this rule.
There you go. Okay,
In a historic building.
There you
in a
go.
Historic district.
yeah, okay.
So,
My
does the
motion
second,
stands.
does
Yeah,
your second
my
stand?
second stands, yeah.
Okay, we have a motion by Board Member Maniscalco, seconded by Board Member Clendenin. There being no further apparent discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
And if you don't mind,
Read the vote.
Motion passes with Carlson being stating no and Miranda being absent at vote.
thank you, Madam. Okay, on to the next one.
Okay, the second question for that same guideline is the board's intent that staff include liquor stores, beer and wine retailers, breweries, and other retailer businesses that are primarily focused on alcohol beverage sales to the list of ineligible establishments?
For a grant period.
Correct.
Any questions on this or motions? Yes, ma'am.
Is there a way that we could just make it to support exterior grants? Because to me,
Yeah, I agree with that.
a liquor store is very different from a brewery. Like someone who's,
But if it's still the exterior of the building, it's still an exterior building, so I would still support it if they were beautifying the building.
yeah, I mean, so if there's a way we could, I
Well,
just,
can I ask a question? If we're talking, the only other grant that really, well, other than pre-development, we would be looking at the interior grant. And we just voted to revise the interior grant so that we're only bringing buildings up to code. And so if our intent, as we mentioned, we're trying to bring the building to code and we want to be able to activate the building, no matter what business is there,
It's a legal business.
it's a legal business. So
Yeah.
I think if you apply the same concept.
yeah, I have to support it just based on the black and white letter of law in that regard, because I still believe that if someone is putting time and money into a property, it's going to improve the neighborhood.
So do I read that as a motion? I'll second that.
Yeah, so my motion is, yes, that I would support
Striking that.
striking,
Not adding those
Right.
uses. Okay.
correct.
Okay.
Can you
Yeah.
repeat?
It sounds like your motion is to not add the, to not add liquor stores, beer and wine retailers, breweries, and other retail businesses that are primarily focused on alcoholic beverage sales to the list of ineligible establishments.
Yes, that is my motion.
We have a motion, thank you very much, by Board Member Hurtak, seconded by Board Member Maniscalco. Any further discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I do want to say that these are guidelines, and this board can change those guidelines at any point.
So if we see this, if
And
we
I
see it's a
think,
problem.
I think that's what's going on here. I think that's really important to state, because while we can be a little concerned if there becomes a problem, if a neighborhood regresses, we can revisit.
So we have a motion by Board Member Hurtak, seconded by Board Member Maniscalco. All in favor? Any opposed?
Nay.
How many more do we have, ma'am?
Just, one more.
That's what I thought. Okay, go for it. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes.
Motion passes with Carlson stating no and Miranda being absent at vote.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. Next one, please.
Okay. With the exception of special projects grant, in the event the property is sold or transferred to a property tax exempt governmental or not-for-profit entity within 5 years of the disbursement of grant funds, the grant recipient will reimburse the TCRA a pro rata portion of the grant for the number of months remaining in the 5-year term. The intent was to enforce retention and maintenance of improvements funded with CRA resources. The question for the board for discussion and vote is it the board's intent to remove the proration language from the repayment requirement associated with the restrictive covenants?
Board Member Hurtak.
So if we remove the requirement, they have to pay all of the money back.
Correct, within
And-
the restricted period.
And quite frankly, in 5 years, yes, I want that money back. So I don't think, no, absolutely not. 5 years? 10 years, sure. We can talk proration, but in 5 years, that's way too little.
You're a flipper at that.
So let me
Yeah,
clarify,
yeah.
anything over 150,000 does get a 10-year restriction. So if we want to separate that, we can do that. I just need to know if you want
That's,
that.
I think that is fine.
After 5 years, go ahead.
After 5 years prorate would be just overall. I think that 5 years should be the minimum. If we're doing that for residential properties, we should absolutely be doing it for commercial.
Do we have a motion in that regard?
So how would you like us to word that motion?
You could say, to remove the proration language from the repayment requirements associated with the restricted covenants for the 5-year, from the 5-year restricted covenants only.
So moved.
Do we have a second? We have a motion by Board Member Hurtak, seconded by Board Member Maniscalco. Go, sir.
Yes, when we pass this language, how does that impact the 10 years? The 10-year prorated after 5?
The 10-year restricted covenants would, oh, I see what you're saying. So if we keep the proration in the 10-year, so for the first, if they
First 5 is
sell
not
within the
prorated.
first 5 years, it's not prorated. And then from years 5
6, 7, 8,
through
9,
10, it would be prorated.
Yeah.
Okay, we just need to revise that wording in the agreement.
Okay.
We have a motion on the floor. Councilmember Miranda, do you wish, can we restate it for Board Member Miranda? Okay, thank you, sir. Just making sure. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Anything else, Mr. McCray, for today?
Yes, good afternoon. Just very briefly for the
Yes, sir.
record, I did hand the clerk 71 letters of support from the presentation of the presenter from Urban Reworks. I just wanted to make sure that was reflected in the record.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you. Yes, sir. And we appreciate all of staff's diligence and patience today. Y'all, God bless you guys. We appreciate you guys.
Yeah, you did a great job.
I try.
Maybe you should do this job permanently.
To quote Bruce Springsteen, you were born to run.
We'll see. Vamos a ver. Vamos a ver. Okay, board members, motions, Board Member Carlson.
No, thank you.
Board Member Clendenin. Board Member Hurtak.
Yes, very quickly. I would ask that CRA staff work with Parks and Rec on demolition of the structures at Burrell Park close to Nebraska Avenue.
Second.
I'd like a written report by July 24th. If that is too soon, I'm also amenable to August 21st. Would you prefer? Okay. Yes, August 21st of 2025. And we have been working on this for a while, so Parks and Rec ideally will have something, but we want those structures down soon.
Second.
We have a motion by Board Member Hurtak, seconded by Board Member Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any discussion? Too late. Okay, anything else, ma'am?
Nope.
Okay, Board Member Maniscalco.
Oh,
Wait.
I think.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, sir.
Board Member Vieira, I believe you may have had a motion.
I got it. I go last.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yep, I go last. But yeah, I have that. Thank you. Board Member, yes, sir, Maniscalco.
Thank you very much. First, happy Father's Day to the fathers. I see a couple up here in the audience, so happy Father's Day to you. My first motion, I spoke to Mr. McCray. I spoke with the folks from Hope, which I know we're familiar with. And this is regards to continuing the commitment that I made to the stormwater ponds in East Tampa. I'd like to allocate $500,000 in this upcoming budget from the East Tampa CRA to go towards the improvement of the Williams Street Pond, Chelsea Street Pond, Bay Street Pond, and then the 40th Street and 19th Avenue ponds. They're both on each side of 40th. I checked with Mr. McCray about money, funding. I've spoken to Hope, just so we can follow up on these commitments and take it from there.
We have a motion by Board Member Maniscalco, seconded by Board Member, was it Hurtak? Have at it. Yes, any discussion?
So just clarification, so it's accommodated within the budget and within the realm of
Yeah,
possibilities?
I've cleared it
Okay.
with Mr.
Good.
McCray.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right.
Anything else, sir?
Yeah, and then one more item. Fred Hearns was here this morning, and he had mentioned, and some people have said, this is the first I've heard of it, regarding building an amphitheater or like a band shell at Perry Harvey Park. I don't know if this was something that Board Member Henderson was working on, but I mentioned it briefly to Mr. McCray. If I could just have a written report to see
Parks.
he's got to talk to Tony Mulkey and everything, but since it's within the Encore CRA, essentially, if we could get a written report on November 13th, I hope that's enough
Second.
time.
And yes, sir, and thank you for that. I was going to suggest this. I wasn't going to do it because I'm here for another year and a half. I was going to suggest that someone do it, and I'm glad you are because it's a really important addition prospectively to that park, which is such a special park, so I'm glad. So we have motion by Board Member Maniscalco, seconded by Board Member Miranda. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Anything else, sir?
No, thank you.
Board Member Miranda.
None, sir.
Okay. Very briefly, Mr. McRae had handed me a report for $135,532.21 for the disability accessible improvements at Waterworks Park. So therefore, he wishes for me to make a motion for us to, Mr. McRae, would it be to appropriate the funds? Okay, there you go, if I may.
From which CRA?
That is Tampa Heights?
Yes, it is.
That's what I thought, okay. From the Tampa Heights CRA.
So I have a motion by Vice Chair Vieira and seconded by Board Member Carlson. Any comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And, okay, and that's it. I had another motion I was gonna make, save it for next month. Not
Move to
time
receive and
limited.
file.
We have a motion by Board Member Maniscalco, second by Board Member Carlson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, guys. We'll see you in 6 minutes.
I'm gonna go home and take a nap, but I'll be back.
You got plenty of time, 32 minutes.
I've got some pillows. I nap under my.